Alright, welcome to another episode of the Middle Aged Metalhead and 10 albums I listen to the most, 1990s edition. So here we are, 10 albums from the 90s. I was pretty much a 90s kid. That was when most of my musical exploration happened and when most of my musical tastes, I think, got solidified. So a lot of the music that I listened to from the 90s, that I listened to in the 90s, I still listen to today. And so for this particular episode, one condition I put while coming up with these albums was no death metal, because otherwise you just have 10 death metal albums. Because, yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of that. So that was off the table. Maybe a separate video for 90s death metal. That would be a fun one. And yeah, so let's get started. From 1990. Slayer, Seasons in the Abyss. Absolute favorite growing up. Had this on cassette. It was released in India, I think by Music India Limited, probably one of those big plastic boxes. Played that to death, and then played the CD to death, and now the record, which I only got earlier this year, is getting the same treatment. This is just one of those albums that you can put on anytime. It's comfort, it's thrash comfort food, really. War Ensemble, Skeletons of Society, Dead Skin Mask, Seasons in the Abyss. This album is just brilliant. Maybe their most accessible album, but also easily one of their best. Slayer, Seasons in the Abyss from 1990. Next up, Alice in Chains, Facelift, also from 1990. I remember being absolutely fascinated by this album cover when it was released on cassette here back in the day. I I don't think I actually heard the band till Dirt came out, which was a cover I was even more fascinated by. And I guess if you looked at it critically, Dirt is maybe the better album. But yeah, this is the album that I go back to all the time. Just an absolute classic from 1990, the first debut album from Alice in Chains. This one has, of course, Man in the Box, Sea of Sorrow, We Die Young, Bleed the Freak, Love Hate Love. I mean, this is just a brilliant, brilliant album. So yeah, that's Alice in Chains. Next up, from 1993, one of my all-time favorite bands. They've been around since the early 80s, and the early to mid 90s is where they really started to, find their groove and just become this completely unique uh, creature. I have a video dedicated just to this album, Voivod, The Outer Limits, but from 1993, this is amazing. I mean, it boggles my mind how this band is still just as amazing today, with their most recent album, Synchro Anarchy, from last year, being absolutely fantastic. But yeah, back in 1993, they were exploring new sounds and doing some of the most wild, out there things that any thrash metal band had ever done, really. Moonbeam Rider is such an amazing song, but then you've got Jack Luminous, the massive epic, probably the longest song they ever wrote, easily. And overall, this album mixes thrash, it mixes alt rock, it mixes prog rock, it mixes just about, it puts everything into the blender, and what you get is an absolute classic. Voivod, The Outer Limits, from originally, I think, 1993. Another favorite from this was in junior college. I may have been 16, 17 when I heard this, maybe even 18. But yeah, White Zombie, Astro Creep 2000. Absolutely love this album. The first album had it on a dubbed cassette, where I still do somewhere. And it had a few great songs like Black Sunshine and a few more. But this album is just banger after banger. I mean, seriously, right from Electric Head Part 1 to Blood, Milk, and Sky, this album just rules. And Maybe this is something that you had to be there to appreciate at that particular point in time when you were also discovering horror movies, you were discovering comic books, you were discovering all of these different slightly subversive pop culture things. And White Zombie just hit the spot when I was 16, 17, however old I was back then. And but even today, this album is just as much fun, right? Astro Creep 2000 by White Zombie. Next up, a friend put me onto this band and absolutely loved it. Don't Not a huge fan of the rest of their albums, but the Tea Party, Edges of Twilight, this is an all-time favorite, and this gets played a hell of a lot. So this band is they're either I think they're from Canada, they may be from Australia. I keep confusing where they're from, but most likely Canada. And they sort of, at least on this album, they sound a bit like Led Zeppelin meets The Doors with a slight Eastern melodic touch to them at times and a Middle Eastern vibe to it. And it rocks hard, and it's just a terrific album filled with great songs. This is, yeah, the Tea Party, Edges of Twilight. But yeah, if you've never heard this band before, check out Fire in the Head, The Bazaar, Correspondences, which is a massive ballad, Sister Awake, Turn the Lamp Down Low, which is really a whole lot of Robert Plant happening in that song. But I'll put a link in the description. Go check this band out if you've never heard them before. Well worth checking out. Next up, if I had a top 20 of my all time favorites, this album would be on it. And it is just absolutely brilliant stuff. Acid Bath, When the Kite String Pops. This is dark, sludgy, you could say depraved, going by that album cover from New Orleans. Absolutely crushing sludge, doom, stoner, call it what you want band. They only released two albums. This one came out, I think, in '94 or maybe 94, and I think the follow-up, Pagan Terrorism Tactics, came out a couple of years after that. But just absolutely fantastic stuff. Finger Paintings of the Insane, Scream of the Butterfly, just two of my really favorite songs from this album. But there isn't a dull moment here. Brilliant album. Next up, another all-time favorite band, Monster Magnet and Dopes to Infinity. This is another really top favorite of mine. You've got, of course, Negasonic Teenage Warhead. You've got Look to the Orb for Warning. You've got Ego the Living Planet. I Control, I Fly. I mean, this is another fantastic stoner rock album. The band toned down some of their more jammy tendencies of the first couple of albums and focused on tightening everything up. Maybe they were looking for a radio hit and looking to get on MTV. They had a couple of videos for this album as well. So I think this is when they broke out, although they may have broken out a little earlier as well. But either way, this is, again, at that point, I think this was their most accessible album, but just an absolute tour de force in songwriting and one of the all time goats of the whole stoner, psychedelic, hard rock genre that sprouted in the 90s and continued through the 2000s. Just an absolutely fantastic band, fantastic album. Monster Magnet, Dopes to Infinity. Next up, Faith No More, King for a Day. Again, an absolutely brilliant album. Angel Dust may be the the choice now, or it might even be a couple of the earlier albums that came out before that. But this is my go-to when it comes to Faith No More. Absolutely fantastic. You've got Digging the Grave, you've got The Gentle Art of Making Enemies, which is pretty much my favorite Faith No More song of all time. Ugly in the Morning. This is just a brilliant, brilliant album. Faith No More, King for a Day. And then I think we're up to number 9. Danzig 4, or the fourth album that Danzig put out, the last of his really essential albums. And yeah, actually, I mean, everything that came out after this, there was hugely inconsistent in quality, but the first 4 albums, man, what a run that was. And it culminated with 4. It was dark, it was heavy, it was depressing, and it really, really grabbed me, just some absolutely fantastic songs. I remember Can't Speak getting a lot of play on MTV here for whatever reason. Until You Call in the Dark was another amazing song, but overall, just a fantastic album. And yeah, this might actually be my favorite Danzig. And finally, number 10 from 1997, Bruce Dickinson, Accident of Birth. I remember listening to the ones that came before this. Tattooed Millionaire was all right. Skunkworks was really, really meh. And Balls to Picasso was, yeah, pretty boring apart from Tears of the Dragon, which is an epic, epic song. But then you started hearing that Adrian Smith was back with Dickinson. Maybe he was prior to that as well, but anyway. And when this album came out, I think I remember everyone being quite excited to check this out, but no one, absolutely no one expected this absolute ball busting banger of an album. I mean, Accident of Birth it's better than anything Maiden have done post 1990, right? It's better than anything Maiden have done since Seventh Son, really. This really was a brilliant, brilliant album. Adrian Smith brought his A game. Roy Z, I think he played the guitar and produced, was absolutely brilliant. And Dickinson, man, he was in the form of his life. I mean, seriously, right from the opening song, Freak, Star Children, Dark Side of Aquarius, Man of Sorrows, the title song, Accident of Birth, Road to Hell, and the album closer, Arc of Space. This is just one hell of an album. That's Bruce Dickinson's solo album, probably his 4th, unless I've got it completely messed up. But yeah, from 1997, Accident of Birth. And those are the 10 albums that I play the most from the 1990s. Hope you're having fun with this series. I definitely am. Reliving some old memories, pulling these out again and listening to them all over again. It's been great. Next up, I should be doing the 2000s next, and the shit is going to get pretty weird. 2010s after that is going to get even more weird. So stay with me while we cover the next 2 decades. For now, comment, let me know what your favorite albums from the 90s are. Let me know what you listen to the most from the 90s, whether it's metal or not. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Like the video if you did like it. Share the video if you want to. And otherwise, stay safe, stay metal, have a good one.